Hello and welcome to another standard video here in the preview event for Aetherdrift. Today we're taking a look at a green-white +1 counter saddle deck, which gets to play with a ton of new cards, including at 1 mana, the adorable District Mascot enters with a +1/+1 counter on it, and then can pay 1 on a green, remove 2 counters from it to destroy target artifact. So we've got a bit of built-in artifact removal, and this also is a mount, so we can saddle it for 1. So just need to tap a creature with at least 1 power in order to do so, and then when it attacks while saddled, we can put an additional +1 counter on it, so it can keep growing over time. And then we've got a ton of other effects that can give us even more +1 counters every time, so that can also scale quite nicely. Then there's the Bulwark Ox, a 2 mana 2/2, another mount that saddles for 1, and whenever this creature attacks while saddled, we can put a +1 counter on a target creature, so it doesn't have to target itself, and we can also sacrifice the Ox at any point to give our creatures with counters on them hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. So a bit of built-in protection against most sweepers, which is quite useful, but also just against spot removal. Sometimes we want to protect one key creature. And then we also have the full set of Lagorin, Soul of Alakria, which is another mount, a legendary one at that. A 1/1 flyer can saddle for 1, and when it attacks while saddled, we can put a +1 counter on each of up to 2 target mounts and or vehicles, so it can target itself, plus maybe our Mascot or Ox. And then at 3 mana, we're also still playing the Tumblewag, another mount that saddles for 2, gives us a +1 counter at the beginning of combat each turn, regardless of it attacking. But if we attack while saddled, we can double the number of +1 counters on target creature, so especially powerful if we already have some counters going on. And then a Botanical Brawler, of course, is one of the creatures that can get incredibly large in this deck, as it gets an additional +1 counter whenever we put a +1 counter on a different creature for the first time each turn, and then also has built-in Trample. And then at 4 mana, we've got 2 copies of Karadora, Heart of Alakria, a 4/2 legend. When it enters, we can search our library for a mount or vehicle and put it in hand, often going for Tumblewag, maybe sometimes the Bulwark Ox. And then if 1 or more counters would be put on a creature or vehicle we control, we get to put an additional counter on it instead. So similar to the Ocelot's ability, which we're not playing in this current build, but certainly a card you could consider. Instead, we still have Innkeeper's Talent, which, similar to the Tumblewag, can give us a +1 counter each turn, can also level it up to give us some more protection with Ward, and eventually double the number of counters we get, which can also be incredibly powerful. And then to synergize with all these mounts, we're also playing the Role Model, which is perfect for saddling them, as it'll end up being tapped, and then at the beginning of our second main phase, we can choose between putting a +1 counter, a lifelink counter, or flying counter on it. And whenever this creature or another creature we control dies, if it had counters on it, we can now move those counters on another creature. So that's also very good in the face of lots of removal. And then rounding out the deck, of course, Llanowar Elves is great in a green creature deck, so we can speed up our curve a little bit. And we've got plenty of mana sinks with Innkeeper's Talent, and also the Offspring on Paw Patch Recruit. So that's a creature we can play early as a 2/1 Trampler if we just need to maybe saddle one of our creatures, but later can also play it with Offspring to make an additional token, so we can maybe saddle multiple creatures at once, and if the opponent tries to target our stuff, we'll get some additional +1 counters in return. And then the mana base, I also made room for 2 copies of the Bucolic Range, which lets us potentially look at the top card of our library. If it's a mount card, we can reveal it and put it into our hand. So if we're maybe flooding out a bit, that's still a way to maybe find some additional creatures. So yeah, that's our deck. Now let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. Okay, we're on the play. Get to start with turn 1 Mascots, turn 2 Brawler perhaps. Sign me up. And then, when do we want to fit in our other mount? Could still be better to play this turn 2, and then turn 3 Brawler can grow quite a bit. So next turn we can already saddle it to give it an additional +1 counter, so it can attack past the Inspector. Now, we might run out of creatures to saddle with, so we'll maybe only be able to saddle one of the 2. Opponent's blue-white. And yeah, it looks like an artifact deck with a new Guide Light. Nice, Recruit's not bad, so now I could either play this with Offspring to saddle both, or play this for 1 mana and play Brawler, which I think I prefer. So we get most out of the Brawler's ability as well. And then turn 4 can play Caradora, which will find a bunch more creatures, so I'm not going to run out of things to do with my mana. So they're both saddle 1, so pretty easy requirements. Attack, and then put a +1/+1 counter on each of up to 2 target mounts and or vehicles. Not bad. And then of course the Mascot can also pay 2 mana to destroy an artifact. So that's pretty good in this matchup. So yeah, that's an impressive start. Didn't even have Lenor Elves, which could maybe speed things up even more. Speed up to 3. Play Caradora. And then, what do we like? Could just go for a Tumblewag here. Bulwark Ox to make our creatures indestructible could also be useful if we're afraid of a sweeper. I think I like Tumblewag, can play it next turn and then still activate the Mascot. And then can go and saddle this. And this. Possible they'll end up trading for the Mascot, but they'll have to lose multiple creatures. Brawler an 8/8. If they triple blocked Mascot, they could take it out, but then they would just take lethal, so that wasn't an option. Opponent falls to 2. Alright, hopefully no Day of Judgment here. The Zoetic Glyph. So they get to hit me for quite a bit as well, but yeah, opponent seems pretty dead now. Alright, can go ahead and attack. Sweet. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw. We do not have white mana to play a turn 2 role model, but we can play a Lagorin on 2, which is probably still good enough here. As a nice follow-up to our turn 1 Mascot. And now we've got perfect mana. I think I still like Lagorin on 2. And then turn 3 we have options. Opponent with a Walker. Okay. So let's go ahead and play Lagorin. Mascot could be a nice answer to all these artifacts if there's more of them. Contaminator, I see. They can proliferate the counters on the Walker. And we currently don't have the best way of blocking the Contaminator, so that's probably going to happen. So then the question is, do we recruit plus role model or Tumblewag? Probably have to Tumblewag, so Mascot's big enough to attack past Contaminator. So we can saddle only the 1 creature now, as opposed to playing 2 creatures which could have saddled both. But we'll still end up with a 4/4 Mascot. So yeah, I guess I could have gone 1-drop plus 2-drop, still end up with a 4/4 Mascot. Upside here is that now we have a Tumblewag that can start doubling counters as well. Innkeeper's Talent grows the Walker. Alright, so recruit plus role model it is. Opponent might have interaction up. I'll just saddle both creatures. Role model could take to the skies. Opponent had a Floodmaw. So then we'll grow a Lagorin probably. I would have liked to saddle a Lagorin here in response with a Tumblewag. Although never mind, you can only saddle as a sorcery, it's different from vehicles. But yeah, I was gonna have to tap the role model anyway, I guess. So that's fine. It's a bit of a setback. But I think I like flying first. Walker 3-3, it attacks. And then Transfer can keep things locked down. Okay, so now Caradora's an option, but it wouldn't let me really attack with the role model. Can still tap the role model to saddle Lagorin just to enable it, and then play Caradora here, so that's still an option. Could also give up on Lagorin and just play a new one with a role model, since this is going to be locked down for a while. And then, yeah, we'll just saddle to put a counter on this, and that's it. And then next turn Caradora, maybe. Yeah, we have options. I think to be mana efficient, I will double 2-drop, and then play this. Get to move the counters, I guess, from a role model's trigger as well. Kind of forgot about that one. Alright, we'll kickstart another Lagorin. Ooh, I guess I forgot it also transfers the stun counters. So that's a little bit of a nombo that I hadn't thought of. Alright, so can still saddle Lagorin, I guess. And I guess we'll tap both. Alright, so there's a lot going on. Can maybe go for +1 counters now. So it is stunned, but it can still attack once at least. Take 4. And a Sentinel, that's okay. And a Bulwark Ox. So it can still only cast the one spell. Might make it Tumblewag now. And then we can saddle Lagorin. Go to attackers, putting counter on role model. These attack. And then I get to put 2 counters in places now. Alright, that seems fine. Opponent double blocks. Take out probably the reach creature. Opponent falls to 3. And we get to move some counters around onto maybe the Paw Patch, just to diversify. That's a 6-5, and this can get another +1 counter. Alright, so we're kind of doing it. Role model's pretty good at multiples, as it turns out. Aha. Opponent's got an indestructible reach blocker now. So won't be able to necessarily attack. Although, let's see. Can now play Caradora, which will give us an additional +1 counter from Tumblewag. And I can search up a Mascot if I'd like to just play something else cheap. Or I could get another Tumblewag for next turn. So yeah, what's the plan? I get 2 +1 counters now. So I could make this a 7-7 attack just to have it tapped. Feels kinda unnecessary. So instead we can attack with Tumblewag to double the counters on recruits. So that can trample for a little bit. Still feels kind of bad when Walker would die and draw them a ton of cards. So we might just play defense this turn. And then next turn we can try and go for it. So then do I even want to tap the role model just to get some more counters? Yeah, I think so. And then put counters on Caradora, maybe. Alright, so we're just splitting up our counters as much as possible. And then next turn we should be able to figure it out. So now this cannot attack or block, since it has a counter on it. But of course with the talent they could pretty easily change that. So now an 8/8 indestructible trampler. Walker attacks. I'll take it. And a Lanor Elves plus Sentinel. Alright, that's a lot of beef. Speaking of beef, my Lagorin's also close to being unlocked again. So if I go Brawler plus Tumblewag, is that better than... Ox could also make my team indestructible. Hexproof and indestructible to all creatures with counters on them. Maybe that's still safer. And then just plan to maybe block next turn, sacrifice. And then we can set up lethal once Lagorin gets to attack again. Sure. Because yeah, otherwise what happens if I saddle Tumblewag? We essentially get 4 counters on the recruit thanks to Caradora. And then I can double the counters. So that would be 8 more counters. So 12 additional power, 18 power trample. Does our opponent survive that? Yeah, maybe they don't actually. Alright, fine. So saddle. And go to attackers. Yeah, that should be enough. Possible we had lethal last turn, didn't quite do the math. But yeah, could have also gone for lifelink and give that a try to outrace the opponent. A lot of options, but yeah, cool to see the role model with stun counter interaction. Hadn't seen that one before. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw with a keepable hand. Bit of a risk of flooding out, but at least Caradora's a nice curve topper. Get to start with Mascots. Turn 2 Lagorin, turn 3 maybe Offspring the Paw Patch. Opponent black-white. Seems like they have a cut down. Probably going for Lagorin, but then I can at least start growing my Mascot. Nope, opponent hates dogs. So maybe Tumblewags to play next turn, so we have 2 mounts to benefit from Lagorin. And Ghost Vacuum, so this is probably the black-white exile deck with a new god. So if they have more removal in hand, playing Tumblewag is going to be a little painful, but I think it's still the move. Opponent's gotta go for the throats. So that's where playing Recruit first to maybe get some more counters could be useful. But this seemed more mana efficient. Since we can always play Recruit for 1 mana later. Now Kaya can make spirits or exile stuff. Innkeeper's Talent's not bad either. Could play it alongside Role Model and wait a turn on Caradora. And then by saddling we tap the Role Model so it can immediately trigger the survival ability. And then which counter do we like with Role Model? Flying doesn't seem all that relevant if our opponent's gonna make Spirit tokens. So +1 counter is probably the default here. Okay, let's see what's next. Tiny Bones makes me discard. I know which card I prefer here. And another one. Alright, I guess it didn't matter. So now we're just leveling up our talents. Opponent is also down to 1 card. And another Lagorin's not particularly helpful. Alright, so go to attackers. Counter on maybe the role model now. So points on empty. At some point they can use Ghost Vacuum for 6 mana, but that's not for a while. And any reason we want flying, I think for now +1 counter is still better. And our opponent scoops it up. Alright, I'll take it. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play. This hand is not particularly explosive, but we do have a role model to saddle the Lagorin to give us more +1 counters. Still feels a little clunky, just because we only have the 1 mount we'll have in place since it's legendary. So we're not going to get the most out of it. This feels a little bit better to me. So we can go Mascot into the Ox maybe, and then Brawler. Although I do need to get rid of a card. Lagorin would also be quite good here with additional mounts. Maybe the Ox isn't necessary, since we'll get more counters this way, I think. And then turn 1 Mascot. Turn 2 Lagorin, turn 3 Brawler. Ooh, a Road Rage, that's too bad. Mascot down. Now we don't have quite as a nice a start. Engineer. Can still play a Lenor Elves. And then we would love to draw some of our mana sinks. Opponent can still turn this into a 3/3 if they exhaust, and they can do so at instant speed. So won't really be able to block. And is this the Witchstalker Frenzy? It is. Alright, so it's not ideal, and we draw another legendary creature here, so we won't be able to deploy it. Another Engineer, eventually can make a Dragon token as well. So our first hand might have worked out a little bit better, since it was more threat dense. Now we're drawing a little elves, which is not quite where we want to be. Well, at least now we can get this up to a 5/5, so it can get in the way of a 4/4 flyer. Might be another Witchstalker Frenzy here. So we'll have to start all over again on Lagorin. Yep. Alright, so play this and Paw Patch with Offspring first, maybe. And sure, we'll hit for 1. Defend the Rider, making a 1/1 token to ambush our elves. Fair enough. That's a way to get around the Recruit giving us more counters, I guess. A land 4 means Dragon. And yeah, we won't be able to attack past it anymore. Partners is quite good as well. reprinted in Foundations. So I'll take it, but this is probably lights out as we draw another land. So yeah, I don't really see a way forward. GG's. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play with a hand that's missing green mana, unfortunately. So I don't think I can keep. This is better. Turn 1 Elves, turn 2 maybe go for Tumblewag. Turn 3 Caradora to find more action. If our Elves gets removed, then our curve looks pretty bad. But I think we gotta try it. Otherwise, we're gonna be down on resources. And green-white. Okay, get to play Tumblewag. Probably start by putting counter on itself. Because then next turn we can put another counter and double it after saddling it with Caradora. Opponent's got the Elite. Yeah, still gonna go with this line. And then I could get another Tumblewag. Unless we are afraid of a removal and want to get the Ox. But I guess green-white, just going big seems fine. So already a 9-9. Thanks to Caradora giving us more counters. And our opponent scoops it up, I'll take it. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw. Our hand seems acceptable. Not our most exciting one drop out of all 12 of them, but there we go. Mascot is a bit better. But a lightning strike will take care of it. Such animal brutality. Brawler, I could wait to play it until I can immediately grow it. For now, go Recruit plus Mascot. Although I feel like I should play 2-drop this turn for mana efficiency. So then Bulwark Ox could also make sense. And then next turn Brawler plus Mascot, for instance. Can saddle the Ox, put counters on it, which will trigger the Brawler. Hammer Skull, 6/6 is pretty large. So that can be a problem for our deck if we don't have a particularly explosive start. So now we can't attack past it. Still probably want to play the Brawler here. And we'll get the Mascot going, which will then trigger Brawler. But don't have a good attack. At least the Ox can still protect the Brawler now. So we're hoping that the Brawler can outgrow Hammer Skull eventually. Alright, I guess they're gonna force the issue already. So they don't really get to attack now. And Innkeeper's Talents can put counter on Mascot to grow Brawler. Might just go double Talents. Definitely one here, and then the other one probably makes more sense on Brawler at this point. So we've got a 5/5, safe from a Lightning Strike, but there could still be the Chomp, which I guess would deal 6 damage here. Alright, there's a new 8/8 Trampler. Okay, so that's large, but we might be able to go bigger. A role model. Good recipient of counters and a way to saddle our creatures as well. So I can play this, recruit and level up talents. Alright, so we've got 2 talent triggers, want to target stuff besides Brawler. And then I may want to tap the role model to saddle Mascot here, just so I can trigger that as well. So if that gets a counter, I want the talents to target the other creatures. Although I guess never mind, I can only saddle as a sorcery, so I'm going to miss out on the role model counter. So I should have tapped this before going to attackers. Which, yeah, is kind of a big deal, because now we only have a 7/7. But I guess we weren't really interested in trading for the Rex. If they have another Rex, they could cycle it. That's 8/8 trample then. So I may need to double block. And then we would just take 10. Although it could also be a lightning strike to burn us out, which would also make sense. Yeah, do we play around lightning strike? That is tough. Yeah, I don't think I can afford to. Move counters onto role model. Are we dead? Not yet, it seems. Another hammer skull. Okay, so we still have a chance. Now, leveling this to level 3 versus playing an extra creature. Probably just playing a Lagorin. Could then saddle it, tapping the role model, just so I can tap it and maybe give it lifelink. In the meantime, Brawler's gonna be huge. And then I can chump the hammer skull if needed. And I don't think I want to pay a life for the extra ward. So, saddle, tap role model. Could also, of course, attack with a role model if I put a counter on it. Maybe that's good enough, because if it dies, I get to move counters elsewhere. Yeah, you know what? Let's do it this way. That happened, so now we can go for lifelink. And pass a turn. And that'll do it. Awesome. Close game against dinosaurs. On to the next one. Alright, we're on the play, and we've got a keeper. Turn 1 Mascots. Could play Recruit on 2. Hopefully we find a different 2-drop. And a nesting bot. Alright, Ox is perfect. As we can now saddle the Mascots, attack past the bots. And then the Ox next turn we can also potentially saddle to get even more counters going. As well as now having some protection built in. Mascot especially good against an artifact deck, as we can pay 2 mana, remove 2 counters to destroy 1. Opponent speed up to 2, at which point it will get 1 more power at max speed. A glide car. Can tap 3 creatures to put a counter on it and give it flying. Okay, Lagorin's not bad either. Do we prefer that or Tumblewag? Could go Recruit plus Lagorin so we can saddle both, which I kind of like. And yeah, the range still makes colored mana for mounts, so that works. I'll play this one first. Otherwise I could have also played it with Offspring to make an additional token to saddle. I don't think our opponent's playing Temporary Lockdown, which would otherwise be quite painful. And then it might be worth it to put more counters on the Mascots. Could also grow Lagorin, so it can maybe attack past 3 Toughness Flyer next turn. Yeah, I guess we'll split out the counters a little bit. Especially if I end up sacking the Ox. I don't want to have a ton of counters on it. And then Tumblewag can give us 1 more counter next turn before damage. Alright, Sentry. We'll see what it targets. Probably the Mascot. So then I would just sack the Ox. And then get one more counter, which can go on maybe the recruit itself. And then we'll sack this. And then now if I play Tumblewag, I can put counter on recruits. So that can attack past sentry as well. And if they crew this, it's a 2-3, so we can attack past that pretty easily as well. Although Caradora also an option. But I think I prefer Tumblewag. So I can only saddle one of my two creatures, but Lagorin makes the most sense, since it can also put a counter on the Mascot. Smash. Okay, we're doing it. No good blocks available. Their opponent's already jumping here. And then next turn I can decide if I want to play another creature or maybe start using the Mascot to blow things up. Opponent will get to max speed here in a second if they decide to attack. Hovership can exile stuff, so probably still goes for Mascot. In which case, Tumblewag probably wants a counter now. So the recruit's also doing some good work. And yeah, I'm tempted to just play another one. And then I can saddle, at this point, probably the Tumblewag. So that can double the counters on something. So if we select Lagorin, that would be lethal. Opponent goes to blockers. Yeah, I suppose they could have still crewed the hover ship to chump my flyer, but they would have been in a pretty rough spot regardless. Sweet, on to the next one. Alright, we're on the draw without a 1-drop, so we might be a little slow out of the gates, but I don't think it's bad enough to mulligan necessarily. So just gotta hope we can catch up. A Ghost Vacuum, so might be the Black-White Exile deck once again. And Knight of Grace. That's okay. So turn 2. Probably start with Lagorin. And then next turn Role Model can saddle it. Wait on Brawler until we can maybe protect it with talents. Or at least move its counters with a Role Model. Take 2. Another Brawler. Yeah, I'll still go with the Role Model here. Opponent answers Lagorin. And there's Catramos. Our opponent finally gets to showcase their god. So with a Ghost Vacuum, they get to draw. They need 7 cards in exile before it can attack and block. Alright, so let's get that going. So for now, don't have an easy time attacking past the Knight, so I might want to just tap Role Model to saddle Ox and play a Brawler as well. And then that'll pick up a +1 counter, which also grows Brawler. And now we can protect him with Ox. Another Knight, more First Strikers, and Vadmir. At least they already exiled my graveyard, so they can't commit more crimes with a Ghost Vacuum to trigger Vatmir. So we want to avoid trading if we can. For now, could empty my hands. I think I prefer holding this to play with Offspring, and then Brawler, Talent, level up Talents. Possible our opponent's playing discard spells, in which case there is merit to just playing the Recruit out anyway. But I might want to level up the Talent next turn as well. And then don't really have any great attacks, unless we're willing to sack the Ox. I think we just do this once again. Talents put counter on the Ox, so we grow the Brawlers as much as possible. Opponent's gonna exile their own stuff. Doesn't count as a crime. And still going for counter, I think. Okay, so don't hate my spot. I guess our opponent does want to exile stuff just to get 7 total for Ketramos. Kaya's pretty good too at filling the graveyard. And then draws a card with Ketramos. Alright, so we do want to start turning our creatures sideways now. And I think level up Talents might be the move. Yeah, opponent's gonna scoop it up here. Yeah, we can have a look at the board, but Talents can put 2+1 counters on, let's say, the Ox. Maybe saddle it with a Recruit as well. And then just by getting counters on Ox, both Brawlers grow, which in turn grow once again, getting 2 counters each time. So that gets out of hand. And then the Brawlers can at the very least pressure Kaya. Could also saddle the Ox with the role model just to have it tapped. Maybe go for flying counters so we can fly over, or just keep going for +1 counters to make the Brawlers enormous. And our opponent's not going to have an easy time stopping that. So we get to see this latest iteration of the green-white +1 counter deck in action, and this is an archetype that just keeps getting better with every expansion, so you can expect it to get even more pieces in the future as well. But for now, all these new mounts play perfectly with the cards we already had. Great with the role model, the Tumblewag, Caradora as a curve topper has been quite nice, but there's certainly other cards you could consider adding to the deck, like Ozolith, and there's a few others I've played in previous builds, so we may not want all 4 Lagorins, for instance, because it is legendary after all, but just wanted to try as many copies as possible to see it in action today. So yeah, that's going to do it for today's gameplay. Want to thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed, and as always, have a nice day.